He's a peanut compared to Ryan Garcia. And that's just a look.
Hello, everyone. Welcome back to the channel. I'm joined with a very special guest today, the one and only Dan Rafael. We have a big fight quickly approaching, David Benavidez versus David Morrell, and it just wouldn't feel right unless I came on with you and got your opinions and your take on it. So yeah, I just kind of wanted to start there. What do you think of the fight, David versus David?
Yeah, and listen, this is a tremendous battle. This is an excellent matchup. I'm super pumped up for it. I'll be traveling out to Vegas to cover that fight. I think it's really one of the best fights that you could make in boxing. I sort of think to myself, I remember hearing my dear friend Larry Merchant at times when they were big fights on HBO, and he would talk about, if you were in a Chinese restaurant and you could order like one from column A and one from column B, this would be the fight you would make. And to me, Benavidez against Morell is sort of one of those fights. In the super middleweight division, it would have been a great fight, but they've now moved up. But I don't think it in any way changes that. They just both put on a few pounds. It's definitely one of the best fights you can make at 175. Probably the best fight other than Beterbiev and Bivol, who we saw fight once before, who are getting ready to fight a rematch on February 22nd. So they're the established sort of older guys in the division who are still at the top, fighting it out for the undisputed title. And the young lions, so to speak, coming behind them that are going to look to challenge the winner of that fight potentially is the matchup between David and David. And it's a fantastic style fight. I can't wait. I think it's going to be a really outstanding fight.
No, I definitely agree with that. How do you kind of see their styles matching up together in the ring? I'm really curious to see how this one's going to go.
Well, I think anybody that's watched either of them fight before knows in terms of David Benavidez, he's a brute puncher, just a forward-moving guy with a really good chin and a desire to mix it up and really battle it out, but is not absent of boxing skills. His preference is to fight in a more physical, go get you kind of style, but he is capable of boxing, even if he doesn't use it as much as maybe his trainers would like to see him do it, because he's more there for the battle. But he's a very skillful guy. He's got a lot of experience, even though he's still pretty young in his career. He turned pro at age, 17? He's won two super middleweight world titles. He had the interim title at super middleweight. Now he's got interim title at light heavyweight. He's been in with good fighters, very experienced as a professional. If you look down his recent fights, he's been taking on the best guys. Caleb Plant, he took on Demetrius Andrade, he took on Alexander Vodzik in his light heavyweight debut, who is the former not only had a belt but was the lineal champion. So those are just three of those wins in the more recent past, and so we kind of know what he's about. In terms of Morell, a lot less professional experience, but was one of these guys that had all the amateur experience. Came out of that Cuban program, southpaw, good offensive fighter, probably a little quicker, a little slicker than David Benavidez, but I don't know if he's shown good punching power as a pro, but his resume and the guys he's faced are not at the same level that David Benavidez has faced. So I think if you look at him, you're like, yeah, he definitely is a good fighter. But in terms of who he's faced, not quite up to the level. Now, this is his opportunity to show if he can be in that same echelon as Benavidez has shown himself that he can be. But he passes the eye test. I'll put it like that. He's a very technical fighter, but he also has a good offensive output. It just matches up really, really outstanding. I mean, I don't know what else to tell you about it, but style-wise, I think we're going to see a good boxing, and there's definitely going to be times in this fight where they're going to have to, stand down and just battle it out at times too.
Most definitely. Well, how do you think Benavidez looked against Vodzik with his debut at 175? I know there was kind of a mix there.
Well, both of them have just had the one fight at light heavyweight. You mentioned about Vodzik. That was the fight that David had in June. That was on the undercard when Tank Davis fought Frank Martin. And he, first things first, he clearly was the winner of the fight. It wasn't like a contest. He won like 8 rounds to 4, maybe 9 rounds to 3. He dominated and won. I won't say easily because Vodzik, put up a game effort, but there was no doubt about who the winner was. He didn't look that great, and David will admit that. I actually had a recent interview with him. We talked a little bit about that, and we'll play that interview on the podcast I co-host on the Fight Freaks Unite podcast, Big Fight Weekend. But the thing about it is, he said in the post-fight of that victory that he had come into the fight with a damaged ligament in his right hand. And then in the early part of the bout, he hurt his left hand. So now he's, got injuries to both hands. He still managed to win, but it didn't look great. Partly, I have to imagine, because of the injuries. So he said to me he wants to, in the fight with David Morrell, he wants to redeem himself for that performance. And I said, David, why would you have to redeem yourself? You were the winner. And his point was, well, no, not because I didn't win the fight, but because I didn't look as good as I wanted to look at light heavyweight. In this fight, I'm injury-free, I'm healthy, everything is good, and I'm going to show that I'm a lot better in this weight class than I looked when I fought the fight that we're talking about with Vodzik.
Do you kind of have a prediction on who will win this fight, or if you see it being by knockout or by decision? Is it going to go all the rounds?
Well, first of all, as far as, well, you asked me about the Benavidez. Let me just, before I get to that, I'll mention just a little bit about David Morrell and his light heavyweight debut, because he also had his first fight. That was a couple of months later in August. He fought on the big card in Los Angeles that was headlined by Crawford and Majimov. And kind of like Benavidez, and that's why I'm just thought of this, kind of like with David Benavidez, we know what he looked like as a super middleweight, but he comes into the light heavyweight division, and he also looked kind of pedestrian. Clearly was the winner of the fight against a very tough and durable opponent in Hot Rod Kalijic, who had fought for a world title before, and is a pretty good fighter himself and a solid contender. But he didn't look great. He got touched up a little bit, and so I think they both want to show themselves they're better in the weight class than they showed in their debuts in the weight class, and they're doing it against the best opponent that they could find in the weight class. As far as who's going to win the fight, I mean, it's a tough pick. That said, while I definitely am enamored by and like the skills and the power and all the things that David Morrell has brought to the table, his amateur background, there's really nothing to dislike, other than the fact he hasn't had the opportunity yet to fight the best guys, but he's getting there, and that's not his fault. All that said, I have a hard time picking against David Benavidez in this fight because of the fact that he has that experience. He has the durability. He's got the power. I think that's even better than what Morell has. He may not have that same level of boxing skill, but it's still pretty good. And he really knows how to handle himself. He's a true fighter. I'm not saying Morell isn't, but I believe that David's got the better durability. And I believe that when it push comes to shove and when it gets to, or gets a really tough in there, that he's gonna be able to bite down and get through it. And I still have questions about whether Morell can do that or not. So my pick is, I don't know if it's going to go the distance or a knockout, but I definitely lean towards Benavidez to be the winner of the fight. But I think getting to the result, however it goes, knockout, decision, it's going to be an entertaining fight for the fans. I think look, it's hard to say. We're only here as we're talking, we're here at the late part of January. It's soon to be February. So there's a lot of time left in the year. But it wouldn't completely shock me if we reconvene in 10, 11 months and we're talking about this on the list of the potential fights of the year.
Wow, yeah, this could definitely be one of those. Where do you think David goes from here? Kind of talking to him, do you know that at this stage, you kind of mentioned the Beterbiev versus Bivol. Is he most interested in finding the winner of that? Or if he was given the opportunity with Canelo, do you think his heart is kind of still there? He wants to take that on. I would just kind of love to hear of how you see his career.
I assume you're talking about David Benavidez, not David Morrell.
I know. I know.
Which David, right?
I'm on David.
What I should have said when you asked me who was going to win, I should have said I got David in this fight.
I would have been like, yeah, that's smart.
No, the winner of the fight is going to be in the position where they're going to be the WBC interim champion, and at the convention that took place in December. They said, because they have to proclaim you as the mandatory, even if you have an interim title, and they did say that Benavidez is the mandatory if he's the winner of the fight. In terms of Morell, he has the WBA regular title, so that puts him mandatory for the WBA title also, and the winner is going to have both of the belts. Now, I don't know if the winner, if it's Morell, if he takes over the mandatory status in the WBC, but it shouldn't matter because he already is the mandatory in the WBA. But the point is, there's a really outstanding chance that the winner is going to at least be in a position to challenge the winner of the February 22nd rematch with Beterbiev and Bivol for the undisputed title. So I haven't talked to Morell about this, but I did ask David about it. And that's absolutely a fight that he wants in the future. Now, of course, like every fighter, he's like, look, I got a big fight that I'm going to deal with on February 1st, but I definitely want to, fight that fight. And I want to be able to go into a fight like that, having proven by beating a Morell that, that I should have that opportunity. I asked him if he's going to be in Saudi Arabia for the fight. He said he might be, wasn't sure. I think there's a decent chance. Turki Al-Sheikh has talked about, having the winner of Beterbiev and Bivol fight Benavidez at some point. I mean, obviously he's got to win the fight against Morell, And I would imagine if David Morrell is the winner also, they would want to have him too. That Turkey got a good look at him because he was the one putting on that show that took place in LA that David Morrell fought on. But right now, it's really cool because at the top of the light heavyweight division, you got the two best guys, the champions, the champion and the former champion, and Bivol and Beterbiev doing battle in a high level fight that took place October. Now you got the rematch coming up in February. And again, while they're doing their business, you've got the next best fight among the younger guys battling out for essentially to become the people's mandatory, if you will. I mean, they'll be mandatory for the organizations, at least two of them. But I think everybody will say, yeah, the winner of that fight should get the opportunity. Now, Canelo, Benavidez has wanted to fight him for the last couple of years. Morell's wanted to also. And Canelo is doing his own thing. He's in the process of maybe making this fight with Terrence Crawford. He's had other defenses of his super middleweight title. Hasn't really talked about wanting to go back to light heavyweight other than if it was to fight the winner, or not so much the winner of Bivol, but if Bivol was the winner and he could fight him in a rematch to try to avenge a loss to become undisputed, that would interest him. But he does not seem interested in Benavidez. And Benavidez's perspective is, listen, I think eventually Canelo will fight me because I'm going to be the biggest name out there for him to make money with. And I'll call him back up to 175 pounds. And so by beating Morell and by becoming undisputed against the winner of Beterbiev and Bivol, it will make Canelo want to fight me more. So he's keeping a positive attitude, even though, he feels like he's been avoided for the last couple of years.
Yeah, no, that makes sense. On that note, though, you kind of just brought it up. What do you think about the Canelo versus Crawford talk? It's kind of funny because I've been asking people this for like the whole past year. And I just talked to Alicia Baumgardner a few months ago. And I asked her about it and she was like, no, that fight's never going to happen. Like, it's great talk, but it's never going to happen. And I'm like, this is crazy that it actually might be happening. So yeah. What do you think?
I think it's probable. And the reason is a couple things. Number one, Crawford has been focused on that fight for a while. Even before he fought the fight at 154, when he won the WBA belt against Madrimov, he was saying he was interested in fighting Canelo Alvarez. So that's something he's hungry for. And if you've ever talked to or covered or know anything about Terrence Bud Crawford, he's not a guy that's going to say that and not do it. You know what I mean? He's not one of these guys that calls somebody out and then kind of ignores it. He's not, I think of the schoolyard bully, where, you're jumping at the guy and is like, hold me back, hold me back. He's not looking for his friends to hold him back. He wants the smoke, as the kids say. You're a kid, right? I say as the kids say.
Yeah.
So he wants that fight. Now, as far as Canelo goes, and it's the biggest fight he can have, there's nothing for him at that level of significance, historically, legacy, financially, in the junior middleweight division. Although there are good fights he could fight at 154, but nothing that's in the remote level financially or attention as a Canelo fight. And at 160, there really isn't a big name guy for him to fight. So he's got his eyes on Canelo. Canelo is in a position where he's been a dominating champion for such a long time. He's cleaned out 168, except for Morell and Benavidez, who we basically ignored and kind of forced them to go to 175. So the landscape at 68 for Canelo to have a big fight is just not there. Now, there's good fighters he could fight. Like, he could say, I'll fight my WBC #1 contender, Christian Mbili, who is an undefeated fighter, makes exciting fights. But that's not going to move the masses. That'll do like the normal kind of, pay-per-view numbers that Canelo does, several 100,000, but not a big mega event, not front page news, as they say. You fight Terrence Bud Crawford, and you're going to make a huge money, even more. Canelo always makes big money, but bigger money even than the normal Canelo fight. And you're fighting a guy that, like you, was a future Hall of Famer. There's a lot of name recognition. You both have different fan bases, so it's going to do big business in terms of tickets, in terms of pay-per-view. So he's finally kind of being convinced of that. And, of course, Turki Al-Sheikh is brokering the deal, and Turkey's got the money. It's always about the money, and he can spend the money. So they're talking about a multi-fight deal that will see him fight probably in the spring and then Crawford in September. Crawford, I don't know if he's going to fight before then. He may just wait till September. But the point is, while it's not done yet, they're moving towards trying to make that go. But again, it's going to come down to the moolah.
Mm-hmm. Well, what do you think about Crawford moving up 2 weight divisions? Like, how do you think he would do in that sense?
Crawford's a great fighter, and when you're the very best, the weight classes matter definitely. but at that elite level, they mean less. So while I don't necessarily sit here and tell you many months before the fight actually would be taking place, if it does actually happen, that I think he wins the fight or anything like that, because I haven't really thought about, frankly, who I think is going to win. Do I think he can compete with Canelo Alvarez? Absolutely, even being two divisions different, because he's got that type of mentality, that type of temperament, the type of physical abilities, the skills, definitely the ring intelligence. But you're also in with a guy that's a really good puncher. He may not have had a lot of knockouts in recent times, but don't make a mistake, Canelo can still crack at 168. He's got an all-time great chin, and Crawford, is a good puncher, but those big punches he landed were really in the welterweight division. He never really seemed to do anything in terms of inflicting punishment or damage on Israel Majimov at 154. Now you're asking about him going up 2 more weight classes. So I believe that if that fight happens, Bud will rely more on his skills and his quickness. Remember also, even though Crawford, is the one anxious to go up the challenge, he's actually a little bit older than Canelo Alvarez. But Canelo's got a lot more mileage because he's been a professional for so much longer and has so many more fights and rounds. But it's a fascinating fight, and it's one of those dare to be great kind of fights. It's reminds me. I'm not saying the outcome will be the same. When Manny Pacquiao, who's a great smaller fighter, he wins the lightweight belt, the WBC lightweight title against David Diaz, and he jumped up 2 weight classes and he fought the great Oscar De La Hoya. Now Oscar was coming down in weight for the fight. This is different because Crawford is going to Canelo's weight class. He's not like Canelo's coming down a weight class or 2. Mm-hmm. But it's the same kind of thing where so many people were like, oh, Manny's going to get annihilated. He's got no chance. And he didn't just win. He annihilated Oscar and sent him into retirement. I'm not saying it's going to be the same scenario. I'm just saying it's the greats of the game are the ones that take that, sort of bull by the horns and dare to be great by making that jump up. So listen, I give Terrence Crawford a lot of credit. He wants to make history and create the legacy and of course make the biggest money. And the way he can do that is by getting a fight with Canelo Alvarez in the ring. And Canelo, he'll fight guys if the money's right. And apparently the money's about to be right.
Yeah, no, that would just be such a historic fight. They're both making history. Switching gears a little bit back to the Benavidez Morell card and that fight. What do you think about the Fulton versus Figueroa rematch? I know a lot of people have been talking about that one too. I didn't get to watch the first fight, so I'd love to hear your perspective getting to see both of them now.
Well, it's about time this rematch is happening. It was such a fantastic first fight. Really super close. Brandon Figueroa obviously felt like he was the winner of the fight. Fulton, pulled it out, got a close decision. It was a title unification. They ended up going their separate ways. Didn't happen. Eventually, they both moved up to the featherweight division. Before Fulton did that, he lost, of course, in a, he dared to be great, so to speak, but also got paid huge money by going on the road, taking his belts to Japan and matching up with Naoya Inoue, and pretty much got beat up, and then stopped and, not competitive. But there's not many fighters, in the history of Naoya Inoue's career who've been competitive against him. So there's no shame in that. But Fulton got himself together. He came back. He had a couple of long layoffs that he was not thrilled about, but he came back with a victory. It was kind of close. And meanwhile, Figueroa was doing his thing. He's won a couple fights at featherweight, got an interim belt, got elevated to the full title holder. But regardless of belts, regardless of whether it's 122 pounds or 126 like the fight's going to be, their first fight was a spectacular fight. It was a fight of the year candidate back. I forget the year it was, maybe 2022, 2021, something like that. So this rematch has been a long time coming. And it's a great opportunity for them to put on a great show and give us the second chapter of what was a tremendous battle the first time around. I hope that they can find that within themselves to give us another great battle like that.
Yeah, I talked to Brendan, and he was saying that Stephen thinks he's going to do the same thing that he did last time. And he was like, no, I'm actually coming like very different this time. So with that being said, how do you see the fight going? Do you see it being a different outcome this time?
Well, I look at it like in terms of the first fight, it was very close, but they've gone in different directions so far. All respect to Fulton for going to Japan and for being able to come back, but the lack of activity, the way he looked against Inoue, more against the other opponent that he fought when he moved up to featherweight, wasn't great. And Figueroa has looked a lot better. So and he's not been active very much either, but maybe a little more active. So I think it's competitive again. But I think I lean towards Figueroa this time, maybe to get the revenge. I mean, the first fight was so good. But again, it's sort of like boxing, it's sort of like, what have you done for me lately? And, but then again, maybe he just has his number. I mean, it was, like I said, it was a very close fight when Figueroa, Fulton did beat him. Again, close, but I think he can turn the tables and even it out. And if it's another great fight and now they're 1-1, hey, maybe we'll see a trilogy fight.
Hey, yep, there's always that possibility. Well, where do you think that Figueroa would go from here? He talked about Inoue when we talked, but there was a lot of comments on that video of fans thinking that he wasn't ready. So just from your take, do you think if he wins, he would already kind of be ready to have Inoue be a potential like next opponent for him?
Yeah, I mean, I don't know when they say he's not ready. Like, what do you mean ready? I mean, he's an established fighter. He's been in the division for a while. He's not getting any younger. So of course he's going to want to fight the biggest fight. The reality is, though, Naoya Inoue is to be the one to make that call. He's still at 122 pounds. He's actually got a fight this weekend where he's going to defend the title. And then his plans are, if you listen to his people, his team, Top Rank, and his promoters in Japan, their plan is to bring him to the United States in the spring. Probably defend his junior featherweight title again. And at that point, there will be a time where he does go to featherweight. Naoya Inoue has spoken about he's not going to be forced into the featherweight division. He's going to go there when he feels like he's ready, when his body is ready to go in that weight class. And I guess Figueroa, if he's got a world title, could certainly be on the list of opponents that they'll look to fight. But the first things first, I think before he leaves 122, and this could be not till at the very least the end of the year, he's going to go back to Japan and he's going to probably fight Junto Nakatani, who is the bantamweight champion of the WBC. And in Japan, and if you're a real diehard boxing fan, that is an absolutely spectacular fight. They'll put that at the Tokyo Dome. They'll draw like 60,000, and it'll be a sensational fight. If he wins that or loses that, for that matter, at that point, you got to figure he'll have done what he has to do. He'll have cleaned out 122. He'll have beaten probably the best guy at 118, and now it's off to 126. And I guess it's a matter of get in line, and and he'll make his selections of who he wants to fight. They've got lots of guys. Featherweight's a good division right now, and there'll be plenty of fighters that'll be looking to get that opportunity with a name like Inoue, make the money like Inoue, whether it's an established fighter like a Brandon Figueroa, a Stephen Fulton, should he win the title. I don't know if there'll be a movement for a rematch, but there'll be other fighters also. Top Rank has fighters within its own company that they'd look to maybe match him up with. Angelo Leo has one of the belts. They've been pushing Bruce Shushu Carrington as one of the top up-and-comers. So, I wouldn't necessarily say that Figueroa doesn't have a chance to get that fight, but he's going to probably be in the line that's going to be 4 or 5 deep.
Yeah, that's exciting though to hear all that about Inoue. I feel like this is going to be like a huge year for boxing. There's just like so much going on. It sounds like every month so far, and it's not even.
And Inoue also, by the way, he's got a relationship now also with Turki Al-Sheikh from Saudi Arabia, who signed him to not a contract necessarily for boxing matches, although that could be part of it. It was really more of a sponsorship type of situation. But he's been saying, if you look at his social media, the fighters that he's working on fight deals with, I don't think it's out of the realm that maybe at the end of this year or maybe early next year, that Inoue would fight a significant fight in Saudi Arabia.
Oh, wow. That would be great. I didn't know that. Thanks for sharing
Possible.
that.
I mean, possible.
Yeah, of course. What do you think about the Isaac Pitbull Cruz fight? Of course, this is his first fight back coming off from that loss against Rayo. Just what are you thinking?
Well, one thing about it is Pitbull is a fan favorite. So whatever he's doing, whoever he's fighting, you're probably going to see a pretty good fight. And the opponent they've matched him up with on this Morell and Benavidez undercard is Angel Fiero from Mexico, who's another fighter that may not have the name recognition or the accomplishments of a Pitbull Cruz, but he makes good fights. If you've ever watched Angel Fiero, he's been in a series of television fights, not necessarily the fight of the year, but always in a good scrap, always in a fun fight to watch. And I think that's a real fight. I mean, Cruz, he didn't look that particularly good against Valenzuela in the loss. It was a split decision. It was close. He should beat Fiero, but you can never say. I mean, if Fiero were to somehow win the fight, I don't think I would say I was shocked by that. So that's a good, solid matchup. Now, if Pitbull Cruz wins, then he's back in business with, some other opportunities. I mean, there was the opportunity. He was offered the fight to go in the doubleheader that's going to be with Devin Haney and Ryan Garcia in the month of May, and to take on Ryan Garcia in one of the, the doubleheader where they're trying to get to the point where Ryan and Devin will have a rematch. There was a lot of weight difference between Cruz and Ryan. They were going to try to do that fight at welterweight. It obviously is not going to happen. If you ask the Pitbull Cruz team, they were like, look, we were interested in the fight, but we didn't want to sit here, 10 days or so before he has an important fight and be negotiating a fight back and forth. We're focused on the fight. Come talk to us on February 2nd. And Turkey was not willing to wait that long. And so he went out and made the fight with Rolly Romero. So Pitbull had the opportunity. They passed on it. But he's got to take care of his fight on February 1st before he can start thinking about other stuff.
That makes sense. Yeah, I wasn't sure about that because, I heard about the Ryan Garcia potential Pitbull. And then I saw that Ryan posted yesterday and his comment said that Pitbull dropped out. So I was like, wait, why? But okay, yeah, that makes sense. A lot of sense. So that could potentially be something down the line, just not right now.
I feel like it was actually a good move for Cruz not to take the fight with Ryan Garcia. That was like they were obviously, if they're doing a card where it's Ryan against Devin in separate fights, and the goal is to have them win to match up in a big fight against each other in their rematch come October, they weren't looking to match either Devin or Ryan that hard. I mean, yeah, they wanted credible opponents and, name guys. But Isaac Cruz is small, even as a lightweight. Now you bring him up to 140 where he had a belt. He's still not that big. He's small. Now you want him to go up to 140. They were going to do the fight. I believe it was going to be a contract weight of 144. He's a peanut compared to Ryan Garcia. And that's look, if he's going to get paid, fine. But I feel like for his career's sake, they probably did the right thing by not going forward with a fight against Ryan Garcia. So Pitbull will live to fight another day. We'll see how things go with Fiero. And they've got now Rolly Romero to fight against Ryan Garcia instead.
Well, what do you think about Rolly Romero fighting against Ryan Garcia? Did you even see him kind of being a contender when they were kind of going back and forth about who that opponent would be for Ryan?
I hadn't really thought about that because I kind of had been hearing about Pitbull Cruz and kind of thought that fight would get done. But in terms of Rolly Romero being announced as the opponent, that sort of fits the bill of a guy that you're supposed to beat, but a guy that will, make some noise and will be there to fight. But, Raleigh's a hilarious guy. He's interesting to talk to. I find his shtick outside the ring far more entertaining than his fights inside the ring, which he's never, to me anyway, never really made good fights. Got a big heart, showed it when he lost in the knockout that he had, not too long ago. I say though, if Ryan Garcia is physically fit, remember he's got the wrist situation he's got to get handled. He also had, he'll be coming off the layoff after the drug suspension. He's had his substance abuse issue. So I have no idea where Ryan is physically. Nonetheless, nowhere idea where he is mentally either. But if Ryan Garcia is right mentally and he's right physically, I think a fight against Rolly Romero for him is an easy fight. Mm-hmm. Left hooks and good night.
Mm-hmm. You're hilarious,
and
Dan.
It could be quick. Let me put it like that.
I got you. Well, what do you think kind of about that? You said they're making this fight in hopes of that Ryan versus Devin rematch. Where do you think the rematch would be like? It just completely clean, nothing going on.
Well, they're gonna if they both are if they're successful in these fights in May, the doubleheader. Now, Turkey Al-Sheikh, if you look at his social media, he announced the card that it would be Romero, Ryan Garcia against Romero, Devin Haney against Jose Ramirez. That will be a welterweight fight. And they also put on, this is not a surprise because the fight was agreed to a while ago. It's an IBF eliminator for number one at heavyweight between Martin Bakole and Efe Ajagba, which is a nice matchup. But if Devin Haney and Ryan Garcia are both victorious on that doubleheader in May, they will have the rematch in Saudi Arabia in October. Now, the fight card with the two of them on the doubleheader plus the heavyweight fight I mentioned, that's supposed to take place in the United States. They're talking about maybe doing that fight in New York. Turkey has this grand idea, which if he can pull it off, would probably be pretty amazing, about doing this card in Times Square, which is, in New York City. I've been doing this a long time. I've never heard of a boxing match in Times Square outside, in that kind of atmosphere. Now, when Turkey put up his information about that particular fight card, he said May. He did not mention the date. My sources tell me that the card is being penciled in for May 2nd. That's a Friday night. So that would actually allow, because remember, that's Mexican Independence Day weekend. There's still a chance that Canelo Alvarez will fight in the spring. If Canelo and Turkey are involved, it may be one card on the 2nd and Canelo on the 3rd, possibly. But we'll have, still a long way to go to get through with all that stuff.
And kind of a little bit different, but when you just said Canelo, I was thinking about retirement. And then, of course, we know that Gervonta Davis recently announced that he might be retiring next year. What do you think about that? Do you think he actually is going to retire?
No, I don't. I mean, Gervonta, look, fighters talk about retirement all the time. We've seen just recently Tyson Fury retired. Now, maybe this one will stick, but that was like his 5th retirement. So
I think
I
Rolly
think
retired too last year.
I think fighters, look, they go through hard training camps, they go through tough fights, they go through a lot of mental gymnastics about getting themselves ready to do what they got to do, and sometimes it becomes a little bit too much, and they decide I'm going to step back and I'm going to retire. And while I don't say that Tyson Fury was lying about it, I'm not going to suggest that Gervonta Davis was somehow saying that, knowingly saying he's retired when he knows he's really not. I think they believe it when they see it, when they say it, and then they take the time off. They relax, they kick back, they get that itch again. I mean, they've been doing boxing stuff since they're kids. They enjoy the spotlight. They enjoy the competition. Some guys like the training part of it better than others. Some guys like the actual fight. They all love the big money. So to think that Tank Davis at age, 30, he's 30 years old now, I guess maybe 31. So not a used up guy at all, still outstanding fighter, still with plenty of big time matchups in his future if he wants to go after them. Lots of money to be made, lots of titles to be won. So I would find it very difficult to see that he would just walk away from that. What else is he going to do? He's 30 years old. He's got hopefully a long life ahead of him, but he's got another, got some good years left in boxing. I would say at least another 5-6 years where he can really cement himself and, put the money in the bank account and do great things and bring in, make big events. It's all up to him if he wants to keep doing that. But I can't imagine he's going to walk away. What's he going to do? Going to go sell used cars? Get a job as a waiter, a dentist? I don't know. I mean, he's a boxer. That's what he does, and he's great at it.
I know. Imagine Gervonta coming up to your table when you just said that. I'm like, no, no, he's a star. But a few more questions. What do you think about his matchup against Lamont Roach? And are you going to be covering that fight?
Yeah, I'm planning to go to that fight for sure.
I'll see you there, Devin.
Oh, yeah, that's good. Barclays is a great venue for fights. I've been to many fights up there. It's a nice change of pace. I love going to Vegas for big fights, but it's a lot easier to travel to from my perspective. And there's nothing wrong with being in New York City for a few days. In terms of the matchup with Lamont Roach, I know when they made the fight, there was a lot of negative kind of blowback there. Lamont Roach, he's nothing good. He's coming up in weight, this and that. And while I'm not going to sit here and tell you that it's the greatest fight they could make for Gervonta Davis in the lightweight division, which has a lot of talented fighters, or even if Gervonta wanted to maybe make the move to 140. But anybody that looks at Lamont Roach and says that it's a walkover fight, I reject that completely. I've covered Lamont Roach and known Lamont Roach and his family from the beginning of his career, because he used to be with Golden Boy when he first started up. So he was kind of a joke. Like, he was on all the East Coast cards, which I covered. He was on because he was a top prospect and he was considered, highly in the company. He was on a lot of the big shows they put on the West Coast. So he was always on those shows too. And because I was always going out to those fights and he was on those cards, and we're both from the Washington, D.C. area where we live, I think there must have been like at least a half a dozen times where we were on the same flight together, going to Washington to Vegas and coming back on Sunday. So over those years, countless times I sat with him and his dad at the airport, shoot the shit and talk about the fights. So I got to know them a little bit, but more importantly than that, so you get to know like their mentality a little bit, what their goals are, but then you watch him fight. Now, he's not a big puncher, but he's a very skillful fighter. He had a tremendous amateur background. I guarantee you when he stands next to Tank Davis, they're going to be, if you didn't know he was a champion at 130 and Tank was a guy at 135 with a championship, you would be like, these are the same size guys. Remember, Tank came up from 130 also. So physically speaking, they're about the same dimensions. Obviously, Tank is a bigger puncher, but Lamont Roach is a really good technical boxer. They've got backgrounds in the amateur. They fought each other in the amateurs. They've got that DC Baltimore rivalry thing going. So I think it's of what was available and what could be made. I feel like this was not a bad fight. And by the way, when Lamont fought and made his first title defense of his 130-pound title, that was this past summer, he looked really, really good. Now, he wasn't fighting like an elite fighter, but the guy was an undefeated opponent. And he not only did he win, but he took him apart and stopped him, which is something that Lamont hadn't really done a whole lot of in recent times. So, again, I'm not going to sit here and tell you it's the greatest fight in boxing, but I think that for people to say it's a shit fight and it's terrible, I totally disagree with that. I think it's a very reasonable fight, and I'm interested in it, to tell you the truth.
Yeah, so he was pretty high up in the rankings too. I think it was ESPN's rankings. He's like in the top 10. I was like, yeah, because I feel like I saw that too from the fans. A lot of people were like not happy, but no,
I mean, they want to see him fight Shakur Stevenson. They want to see him fight maybe at 140 against a Teofimo or a Haney or somebody like that. Those fights weren't happening right now. Okay, fine. So, I appreciate that you want to see a bigger, better fight maybe, but you have to also look at the guy that's there in front of him. Like Lamont Roach has, one loss years ago in his first world title fight, to Jamel Herring when he was at his best, and it was still a competitive fight. Okay, so he lost the fight. And look how many fights he's won since then, and he's looked pretty good outboxing guys. So I have no problem with the fight. Again, I'm looking forward to it.
And where do you think Gervonta goes from here? Do you think he will have another fight this year? I feel like for the past 2 years.
I sure hope so.
Yeah, I know. It's been like one fight I feel like we've seen of him for the past couple years. Who would you really like to see him get in the ring with? Are you also one of the Shakur people?
I would love to see him fight Shakur Stevenson because to me, they're probably the two best guys in the lightweight division right now. They both have titles. They both have very different styles from each other. Tank, we know about the big, gigantic punching power, but also very smart in the ring and pretty good skills also. Shakur's not a puncher like Gervonta Davis, but he's the consummate boxer, an incredible defensive fighter, really knows how to use the ring. And again, very, very experienced, a great amateur fighter, was an Olympian, silver medal winner. So, there's a lot to love about that matchup. And I think that, they just have to decide that this is the fight they want to pursue. I mean, it takes two to tango. And, the companies I think can get deals done. Shakur's recently signed with Matchroom Boxing. They haven't really done a lot of PBC business, but it's not impossible. If Turkey's there and he's waving money around, we'll see what happens. But that would be the biggest fight at the lightweight division right now. Because remember, just a couple years ago, the lightweight division was the one where everybody wanted to see all these guys mix it up. It was Tank Davis. It was Ryan Garcia. It was Teofimo Lopez. It was Devin Haney. Shakur Stevenson was about to come into the division from the 130-pound weight class. So you had a lot of really good star power, a lot of good names. Some of them have started to fight each other, but Tank and Shakur are the ones that are still looking for those bigger kind of fights.
Yeah. And my last question for you, Dan, thank you so much for taking the time today.
It's like old times.
Right? I know. I love it. It feels good to be back. What would be your dream matchup to see this year?
My dream match and any matchup I can do. Well, I've actually wrote a piece about this where I was going through my most desired fights. And it's, a lot of people might say it's like, some big heavyweight fighter, someone like a Shakur and a Tank Davis fight. Well, and I definitely would like to see those fights. I would still like to see Tyson Fury not retire and give it one more fight. And let's see the Joshua fight just for the sake of that having never happened. And let's get it on before they truly close the door. But if I could pick one fight, and I know this is real, like down in the weeds, kind of, you got to really be a diehard. But I love this fight. I actually joked around. I was like, I'd give up like one of my fingers or toes for it. I want to see Junto Nakatani, who I just talked about being the guy that's going to probably move up to 122 to take on Inoue at some point in the next, little bit of time. But the fight I want to see is Junto Nakatani against Jesse Bam Rodriguez. For Bam Rodriguez, who's a 115-pound champion, to go to 118, or even Junto Nakatani, who's only been at bantamweight for a little while. He was a former champion at 115. I mean, if they got to meet in the middle at 117, whatever, I don't care. Give me Junto Nakatani and Jesse Bam Rodriguez, and I would just be thrilled about that. That's an incredible fight on paper to me.
No, you're right. Actually, I haven't heard anybody say that one yet, but that is a great one. Do you think we'd ever see that, or you think it maybe down the line?
I mean, one thing about it, Bam Rodriguez is talking about he wants at some point, he's got Inoue in his eyes at some point. So he obviously knows he's going to have to move up in weight. Jesse's still a young fighter, just turned 25 just the other day. Hasn't taken big damage. I mean, he's not even in his prime yet, I don't think. And he's a really excellent fighter, a diligent worker by all accounts in the gym. Can he go up a couple more weight classes? He's not a big guy, but I think it's possible with his skills and with the desire. So I actually was at that LA card in August that I mentioned when we were talking about with Morell on the card and when Crawford fought Majimov. So Bam wasn't on the show, but Bam was there just to support, Robert Garcia, who's his trainer, had some guys on the show. So just by coincidence, I actually found myself sitting there's like a lobby restaurant bar type of place with stuff in the lobby of the hotel we were all staying at. And I was sitting with Bam for a little while. We weren't like doing an interview. We were just kind of shooting the shit. And he was telling me like that was the fight he'd like to fight at some point against Inoue. So, but the point I'm making here is if he's got the designs on, if I want to see the Nakatani fight and he's thinking Inoue, and Nakatani hasn't even got to that weight class yet, why wouldn't it be possible? I mean, that would be, you know, if it made sense. I can't imagine. First of all, Bam doesn't turn fights down. He's fought, you know, everybody they put in front of him, and Nakatani has shown that he's interested to fight the top guys also. You know, Nakatani trains in the United States, so he's around that California culture of boxing because that's where he trains in LA with Rudy Hernandez. That'd be a fantastic fight. And, you know, to make a long story short, I think eventually maybe it's possible. Maybe it's possible. Better than not being possible at all.
No, exactly. Such exciting times for boxing right now, though. I love it. This was such a fun conversation, Dan. Thank you so much. I appreciate you taking the time as always. And any last words for all the fight fans watching?
I don't have last words. I just say, you know what? If you want some more information, go hit up my newsletter at danrafael.substack.com and log in your email address, and you start getting my email blast of the Fight Freaks Unite.
Yeah, you guys, make sure to go check that out. And thank you again, Dan. I hope you have a great rest of your week. Bye, everyone.